All right, I hope everyone had a good break. We're here for our first panel today. Exactly, a fireside chat. We got Daouda here from CreatSafe. We've got Lady PheOnix from YESUNIVERSE. Eric online with us, one of the co-founders of Manifold. And Parker, you created this panel. Please lead the way.
All right, thanks, Carl. So, hey, everybody. I'm Parker. I'm the VP of NFTs at Ledger. So, over the last 9 months, one of the things that we recognize, well, I started in February of this year. One of the things that became really apparent to me when I started talking to the artists and the brands was that they were all unaware of three really key principles in the blockchain space. And the first principle that almost everyone was unaware of was this idea that they could actually create their own public and private keys and do it in a safe and secure manner. Secondarily, even more people were unaware that they could use those public and private keys to create their own contracts. And then lastly, unbeknownst to even more, was that they could use those public and private keys stored on a ledger to mint assets or NFTs against the contracts that they created themselves. And so because I recognize this, and I recognize this as like something that was a massive need for them to understand, what we've basically told everybody was, look, we understand that you see that there's a massive opportunity. There is. It's incredible. It's incredible for artists. It's incredible for brands. And what we said was like, hey, look, you should learn about these three things before you dive in. It'll actually benefit you. And so, we taught them about a bunch of those things. But even though we had these sessions, almost at the end of every session, it was still like, man, I don't really get what this is. So we encouraged everybody. We said, look, man, just go out and start talking to people about these three things. Like if you talk to them about anything at all, talk about these three things and see what their responses are. So with that, as we were talking to artists and brands, there was Lady Miss PheOnix, there was Daouda and his team, and there was Eric and his team. They had taken the torch, and they were actually spreading this gospel as well in real time to artists and to brands. And we recognized that. So at Ledger, it was like, we've been watching every single one of them going, holy fuck. There's somebody else that's like us that understands that if we give artists the ability and brands this information, they can make informed decisions. They can maintain agency and they can maintain control. So what I wanted to do today was, because I found what everybody here was doing was so special, was I wanted to give everybody a moment to talk about what they've done and how they've worked in the space for the last 9 months to progress these three principles.
Hello.
So thanks, man. That's it, and I'll leave it from there. It's like, I'm super excited to hear these stories. I know we just met backstage. I've known Daouda for almost a decade now, and I've met Eric recently, and so some of this is going to be really new to me, and so it's kind of what Pascal and Ian says. It's like, I made this because this is what I wanted to hear, and I hope that it's something that you want to hear as well. And so thank you, everyone, and over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I guess for me, my first journey into helping artists with sovereignty was back in October of 2020. Myself and an artist in the space named Coldy started the first Crypto Art Week that really brought all of the artists together, the whole space. And in that time, there's a little known individual called Mike Winkleman, AKA Beeple, who was getting started in the space at that time. And before he came to, make his first drop, I said, is your first drop going to be sovereign? And he said, what is that? Nobody ever talked to me about that. I have no idea what that is. And I said, well, man, you gotta know. I said, if you don't drop sovereign, it's gonna be a tidal wave on the entire space. Your first drop has to be a sovereign drop. And so Coldy and I broke it down to him, saying like, look, it has to be from your wallet on your own contract. These are the two basics to get started in the space. And it's known now. At the time, it wasn't something that people talked about, so we didn't talk about it. I specifically didn't talk about it, but he did that. He dropped on his own contract on Nifty Gateway, and he was the first and only artist on that time who had ever done so. And it's huge. After that, it created quite a tidal wave, but in the most positive ways. And the other artist said, WTF? I don't know if we can actually curse here, so I won't. But they said, WTF, what is this thing about dropping sovereign on my own contract for my own wallet? I want to do that. And now we are here, and you have incredible companies like Eric and his mates are doing at Manifold who make it popular and sexy now to have their own contract with their name or other designs and cool things on there. And now it's kind of a standard, right? Yeah. People don't want to drop unless they're able to drop in a sovereign way. And I think that's incredible. And so, yeah, that's kind of my toe into the space in terms of creating sovereignty for artists. And then I curated Christie's first NFT auction. And all of those artists, from Jenny Holzer to Urs Fischer to Namjoon to IX Shells, Letabo, like all of those artists dropped sovereign on their own contracts from their own wallets. The show was completely sovereign, and it's called Proof of Sovereignty. So I don't want to take too much time. Daouda is a goat, so I want to give time for the goat to speak. But thank you for having me. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you.
Hi, my name is Daouda Leonard. I'm the CEO of a company called CreatSafe, and one of the artists that we work with, Grimes, we had done a NFT drop earlier this year. I think it was in February, and it was at that time that I was recognizing that, as Parker was saying, most artists, who were becoming privy to, the idea of selling digital assets didn't even understand what it meant to have like a wallet, let alone, own your own keys, write your own smart contracts. And so it was a great experience seeing the success of that, but then also realizing, okay, 2-3 years down the line, like what would that mean for, an artist to have minted using their own keys, using their own smart contract? It would truly mean that they own those assets. They sold them in a way that was like their own agency on the price, on who they were selling it to, how it was being sold, all these different things that like generally doesn't happen today, across different media. And then months later, there was a brand new artist came to us by the name of Dat.xyz. And we worked with Nifty Gateway again. And at the time, I called Parker and I'm like, I need some keys. And he got me some keys. Because, I think there was like a shortage at the time. I don't know. And I contacted Manifold and was able to connect Dat to Manifold. And they did this drop using their own smart contract. And so for an artist to have, never, they weren't purchasing crypto, they weren't buying NFTs, and now it's like their first foray into like selling digital assets, and they were able to do it in a completely sovereign way. I thought that was like just a really powerful moment in like my journey working with artists over the last like 18 years. to give that like moment to a brand new artist. And so we think about that today, you know, as we build interfaces for artists to do that on the music side. The focus is, you know, going to be, hey, how can we enable them to do that with their own keys and their own smart, you know, smart contracts, specifically in like the audio space, because that's another place where, generally speaking, you have like you have a lawyer that you have to go to in order to be able to sell your music, sell your rights. And a lot of times you're doing it on, let's say, a studio or a recording company's contract. And to now kind of flip that paradigm in music, I think that is like a huge moment that we're upon.
Yeah. So Eric, oh, sorry. Yeah, absolutely. You're also part of that revolution. Tell us a bit about your journey and what you've been doing.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Eric. I'm one of the co-founders of Manifold. You know, my last company, I spent a decade working in mobile gaming with my current co-founders. The three main pillars of mobile gaming, or any successful mobile gaming product, has always been great content, engagement, and community. When we worked on this for the last 10 years, we spent a lot of time thinking about how digital content, specifically digital goods, applied to digital communities. And so it was no surprise to us when, over the last 12 to 18 months, the concept of NFTs became more and more accepted. We were very excited about this future and what it would mean. But of course, being very novel, we spent a lot of time thinking about the primitive constructs that enabled true ownership of digital content, true ownership of digital goods. And so Manifold started really because of, quite frankly, a side effect of us experimenting with some early artists who were in the space. Namely, we worked with Mad Dog Jones, Pack, Fuck Render. And what we did was really quite simple, I think. We found some very forward-thinking artists who were creating great content at the time. And we sort of shared our playbook from gaming as to certain mechanics that would be, possibly complementary to the content that they were creating. And what we learned was that at the time, this was about 12 months ago. That was a very quick 12 months. Although artists were embracing this new technology, NFTs, not everyone fully understood what was capable, the underlying technology, specifically, that the underlying smart contracts that enabled NFTs were not really being used to their full potential. And why is this? Well, it turns out that the reason was quite simple. With the nascent nature of NFTs from about a year ago, most artists, with an exception of a very few, were still minting their tokens using platform contracts. And when you're minting your tokens with a platform contract, of course, those tokens don't belong to you. That smart contract doesn't belong to you. And further, you don't have the ability to customize that underlying smart contract, which prevents you from doing anything beyond sort of cookie cutter implementations. And so Manifold began as a sort of a necessity. We worked on building these basic building blocks for artists to fully own their own underlying token minting smart contract. And this allows artists to, one, preserve provenance, have true, authentic digital goods, and then lastly, have future-proof, extensible functionality. I think the big aha moment for artists that we work with is the moment they deploy a smart contract on their very own. And of course, we always advise artists to do this with a hardware wallet, because at the end of the day, you know, it's like having the keys to this really awesome printing factory, and you don't want those keys to be lost on a software wallet, of course. And so we always see this aha moment when artists deploy their own smart contract, have it secured with a hardware wallet, mint their very first token, and there's this light bulb moment that goes off. It's like, wow, I have truly created something of my own, and I can offer this to the world. And I think this is the beginning of a very exciting paradigm. And so, you know, that was how we got started. And to this day, you know, we've had the great opportunity, very lucky to be able to work with some really amazing artists, brands, companies, so forth. And we've been doing our job and trying to contribute back to the community positively and provide these what we think are very basic sort of primitive tools that enable artists to fully own their creative output. We call this creative sovereignty. And so that's the story of Manifold today.
Cool, very cool. Thank you. All right, so we heard you. Like, self-sovereignty is obviously like basic, right? You need your wallet, you need your keys, build your own smart contract. I hear you. I'm an artist. How do I get started?
Well, I guess you would go to ledger.com and buy a wallet. Or you know, any hardware wallet, obviously, but I prefer Ledger. But that's how you would get started. I mean, I think that's the no pun intended key.
Cool, thanks, man.
To starting, and I think, you know, at that point in time, for me, I think everybody has to go through sort of like an initiation, which is like learning to use a hardware wallet. But even also like experimenting with a software wallet. I think there's like the moment where you have to see the benefits of both and you have to understand the reason for choosing. I think that the biggest thing that we're talking about here is this concept of agency, where, you know, sometimes you might want a custodian, like there are benefits to that, like where you're like, oh, I have this partner that's protecting my keys. Yeah. But then there's the moments where you're saying, oh, I'm doing this on my own because I want it to be on my own, and you're making that decision. And I think when you're able to see both, I think 10 years ago, maybe even a couple of years ago, in sort of the Web 2 mentality, you didn't know that you had that option. It was never presented to you. And so now that it is presented to you because of, you know, the concept of like what all Web 3 is, it's a really cool moment. I think also when I think about the concept of like the term primitives or like these primitive tools, it makes you think like, oh wow, like this is maybe the first time in like since we've been doing things digitally that you're almost like etching it in stone. Like there's actual like axe and a pick in, you know, in the processor and in the cloud, making that like sculpting that digital asset. And that's kind of a really cool way to think about it, and that's what you're getting started doing, I think, by just like going down that path of learning how to use a wallet. Maybe like Lady PheOnix has also other ways of getting started.
Your way of getting started is good. I'm actually quite curious to hear from Eric on how, you know, they get started with artists and like how that whole process works, because I think the artist first and foremost needs to understand that they can do these things, right? There's, you know, artists, when we work with artists at YESUNIVERSE or Universe Contemporary, we sort of encourage them to look 25, 50, 100 years into the future, and to look at the work from that vantage point, and then let's work our way backwards. And it usually changes how they drop, right? So we also, in that 100-year view, 50-year view, we encourage them to think about their digital will or estate. A lot of artists don't realize that these assets are actually value, right? Sometimes they think only on the present moment for the drop, and I always encourage them, like, let's think beyond the drop. Like, this isn't only this moment. This is a pebble, if you will, into the lake or the ocean or what have you, and those ripples go out through time, right? Some people have become, people in the NFT space always love to call each other legends. I'm not knocking anybody, but, you know. So some people have truly become legendary, such as what Mad Dog Jones did with Manifold on his really first sovereign drop, what Beeple has done in the space, what IX Shells has done, and other people have done, right? They have created legendary moments. And because of that, right, nobody knew it would quite get to those, you know, to that level. So you have to really be thinking about yourself beyond. We're in the time of immortality now, in a sense, right? So we have to be thinking about our digital assets having a life much, much longer than ourselves. So I know there's sort of the technical way to get started, but for me, it's really important that the artist in particular, and the brand, but the artist in particular, be thinking about the immortality of the product they're putting into the world, of the artwork they're putting into the world.
Very insightful. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm curious, like Eric, the same question I have is like, you know, what is the future for Manifold, and how are you, you know, through 2022? What is your plan on how you guys are going to start to engage the wider artist audience?
Yeah, you know, when we first started, the Manifold Creator Contract wasn't the very first sovereign minting contract on the market. In fact, you could go to Rarible. There were various open source ERC 721 minting contracts available. The big difference is with the Manifold Creator Contract, there is a very simple but very elegant plugin framework. This enables what we call extensibility. Why is this important? Well, sort of like what Lady PheOnix was alluding to, we also think of these digital assets as immutable and just very long-lived digital goods. You know, the 50, 100-year horizon is a wonderful way to look at it. You know, I often say that to artists who are minting their first digital works, you know, 20, 30 years from now, you could be the next, you know, digital Picasso, right? And you better hope that if you become that next digital Picasso, that you know, that your collector can flip around that, you know, piece of art that you've dropped, and they can verify that that was actually issued by you, rather than some, we'll call it some miscellaneous, you know, third party. If we believe that, you know, the shelf life, or say the lifespan or career of a digital artist in Web3 is going to be 20, 30, 40, 50 years, well, then so should be the life of the underlying smart contract. Now, we can't predict what's going to happen in the future, but certainly there will be, you know, new mechanics and new engagement systems. And so you want your underlying smart contract to be able to interoperate with, you know, future protocols, or again, future schemes and engagement mechanics. And so the idea behind the Manifold Creator Contract is that it has this very simple but elegant extensibility framework that allows your pre-existing tokens to be future-proof by way of installing extensions on your smart contract. Sort of think of it as like the ability to install apps onto your own iPhone. And your iPhone has a camera that, you know, when you take a photo, it mints a token. Same sort of thing. Now, there comes a cost to having this extensibility, right? So, you know, up until a few weeks ago, one of the most embarrassing things about the Manifold creator contract was the cost. Cost around 4.5 million gas. In today's dollars, that's with today's gas fees, that's about half an ETH. So it's a rather expensive proposition for any new creator, especially if you're getting into the space for the first time. That's a rather hefty investment you have to make. One of the things that we're very proud about over the last few weeks is we've been testing, and we're going to announce very shortly the next iteration of our creator contract, which is now 14 times cheaper. In fact, it costs less than 350,000 gas. So in today's dollars, with today's gas fees, that's less than $200. So I think that's a remarkable improvement, and that again lowers the barriers of entry for any new creator to get started with their very own sovereign minting contract that's future-proof, extensible, can be used basically forever. Our viewpoint is that, again, there are many ERC 721 and similar minting contracts available on the market, but they're designed mostly as sort of these use once disposable contracts. Our viewpoint is, again, that as a creator, you ought to be it's in your best interest to aggregate as much of your work as an artist behind one contract, which eventually becomes your identity, right? And so, of course, that underlying smart contract should be future-proof and extensible. And that's our viewpoint. And so our goal is to make it as cheap as possible and as accessible as possible so that, a creator, once they start using it, won't have to think twice about where they're minting, and therefore they'll have the ability to aggregate as much value and equity as possible under one brand contract. This is a very important mission. And again, we don't take any fees when we do this because we think this is just the right way of doing things. Hopefully that answers that question, Parker.
Yeah, cool. So I think, Carl, we at time?
We have 2 more minutes.
So we have 2 more minutes. Okay, cool. Well, so we're at time. So if today, Eric, where does everybody find you? So everyone knows where to find Manifold and Manifold Studio and Manifold Creator.
Yeah, we're just on the web, manifold.xyz, and on Twitter as manifoldxyz.
Cool. Yeah, and we'll start with you too, Daouda. Where does everyone find you online? And
Online, it's creatsafe.xyz. We're actually now in beta of a minting, like a wallet and minting interface for audio creators. The idea is that, we want to make it really easy, quick, and cheap for anyone to mint audio. And even like the concept of the extensibility sort of layer of where like rights come into play. So that's why it's important that, for artists to begin minting on their own contracts, because then you can add those extensible rights layers later on down the line. On Twitter also, it's at CreatOS.
Cool. And you, Miss PheOnix?
Yeah, we're universecontemporary.com, and on Twitter at, you can just hit me up personally on Twitter at YesLadyPheonix, PheOnix. Our Crypto Art Advisor is our business Twitter, Universe Contemporary. We don't have a .xyz, but we do have a... I feel so Web2 now and lame. But we do have a project that we're working on called Minty Universe, and it's our studio where we help companies set up DAOs and help artists become completely sovereign in the space. We believe the future is personal chain, as I'm calling it, and we believe every artist will operate sort of in their own personal way as personal chain, also become their own DAO. The artist will be the universe, and everything else will be satellite around them.
Well, right on. Well, thank you. I can't thank all 3 of you enough. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, PheOnix. Thanks, Daouda. Really appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.